These are the lecture notes for Chapter 8 on cellular respiration. There are 5 sections. Section 1 is an overview of cellular respiration. You definitely are going to need to know the overall reaction, the overall chemical reaction for cellular respiration. But since we have completed Chapter 7, it's going to be the reverse of the reaction for photosynthesis. Now, Section 2 is on the first step of cellular respiration, which is glycolysis. Glycolysis occurs in the cytoplasm of the cell. And then the rest of the reactions, there are 4 reactions in cellular respiration. So there's glycolysis, and then the other 3 reactions occur in the mitochondria. Section 3 is on fermentation, because fermentation is another pathway that does not produce as much energy as aerobic cellular respiration, but it is a pathway when there is no oxygen present. Then we have the last 3 reactions that occur inside the mitochondria. So basically we start out with glycolysis, which is the first step of cellular respiration. Then we kind of take a side note and do fermentation. And then we come back to the last 3 steps of cellular respiration. So not really organized like in the way that I would organize it, but it all works out in the end. The last section we won't really stress as much, but I will briefly cover it on metabolism. Now, section 8.1 on cellular respiration. So you have a definition up here at the top. Cellular respiration is a process that breaks down nutrient molecules. So nutrient molecules come from the foods that we eat. A lot of the food that we eat is in the form of carbohydrates, and those carbohydrates get broken down by our digestive system, usually into a molecule of glucose. So we always talk about cellular respiration in terms of breaking down glucose. But cellular respiration can also break down not just glucose, but other carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. So to keep it simple, we'll say that it's glucose, okay? So it's a process that breaks down nutrient molecules produced by photosynthesizers with the concomitant, what a word, production of ATP. That just means that during the breakdown of the nutrient molecules, we also get ATP out of that. Now, cellular respiration consumes oxygen gas and produces carbon dioxide gas. So it uses oxygen as a reactant and produces carbon dioxide as a product, as a waste product. Also, cellular respiration is an aerobic process. So it does use oxygen. It's aerobic, okay? What you can see in this picture is a moose and some trees. So the trees represent the photosynthesizers, and the moose represents an organism whose cells are going to carry out cellular respiration. But I like this picture for another reason, because we can kind of take care of a misconception. This moose is going to carry out cellular respiration. In other words, this moose is going to, the cells of this moose are going to break down glucose, and by breaking down glucose, they are going to produce ATP, energy. But the plant cells are also going to carry out cellular respiration. So the only difference is the plant cell makes its own glucose, but then it still takes that glucose and breaks it down for energy. So it's not just animals and other organisms that are carrying out cellular respiration. Plants also carry out cellular respiration in addition to photosynthesis. So it's very important that you know that. Plants don't just carry out photosynthesis and that's it. They still have to, after they produce the glucose during photosynthesis, they still have to break it down. That's why they have both mitochondria for carrying out cellular respiration and chloroplast for carrying out photosynthesis. Okay, so this is the overall equation in chemical symbols, and also, well, it has one word up here. I don't have the words for oxygen, carbon dioxide, and water. But anyway, this is the overall equation, so let's go over it. Glucose, C6H12O6, plus 6 molecules of oxygen react in the mitochondria to produce 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, 6 molecules of water, and energy in the form of ATP. This is the overall equation, but it's like photosynthesis. It doesn't just happen in one step. It happens in many, many, many steps. Many steps have to take place in order for this entire reaction to occur. Now, you also see two words here, oxidation and reduction. If you remember oil rig, oxidation is loss, reduction is gain. So glucose undergoes oxidation. We say glucose is oxidized. Now, where are the electrons it's going to lose? We know it's going to lose electrons. The electrons are found in the hydrogen, in these 12 hydrogen atoms. So what you see happening is glucose has the atoms carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And after cellular respiration, all of that hydrogen is gone. Glucose has now become carbon dioxide. So there's no hydrogens in this molecule, carbon dioxide. That is where the electrons are. They're located in the hydrogen atoms. And so since glucose has lost 12 hydrogen atoms, it has lost electrons, and so it has been oxidized, okay? And then the reduction is the gain of electrons, and how we see it in this chemical reaction is we see the gain of hydrogen atoms. So the electrons are located in the hydrogen atoms. So this oxygen molecule is reduced to water because it has gained 12 atoms of hydrogen. And it's 12 because there's 2 hydrogens in water, and then 6 times that gives you 12. Anyway, oxidation and reduction both occur during cellular respiration. Oxidation is loss of electrons, and reduction is gain of electrons. But a lot of times if you haven't had chemistry, you don't understand that the electrons are located in those hydrogen atoms. So that's how you can tell what's been oxidized and what's been reduced. Okay, so we say that glucose is oxidized and oxygen is reduced during this process. I'm going to skip that slide and come back to that in a minute. There are 4 phases of cellular respiration. They are called glycolysis, the preparatory or prep reaction, citric acid cycle, and electron transport chain. So an overview is that glycolysis is the breakdown of glucose into 2 molecules of pyruvate. It occurs in the cytoplasm. The rest of the 4 phases occur in the mitochondria. So glycolysis occurs in the cytoplasm. It produces a small amount of ATP, but it does not utilize oxygen, so glycolysis is an anaerobic reaction. It's the only one of the 4 phases that is anaerobic. And then the prep reaction, both of the pyruvate molecules that were produced during glycolysis are oxidized, and they enter the mitochondria. NADH is produced, and NADH is a carrier of hydrogen ions and electrons, because you see there's a hydrogen on the end of it. So it's going to store electrons and hydrogen ions. So NADH is produced, and then 2 carbon dioxide molecules are produced. What is not produced in the prep reaction is ATP. Okay, so the prep reaction converts pyruvate into a molecule called acetyl-CoA, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. That's just an overview. Then we have the citric acid cycle, which also occurs in the mitochondria. and it produces these carrier molecules, these I can't remember if they're coenzymes or what, but I know these are sources of electrons for the last phase of cellular respiration. So both of them have hydrogen on the end of the chemical formula, and that lets us know that they are storing electrons for us. So the main purpose of the citric acid cycle is to produce this NADH and FADH2. Another thing that is produced is 4 carbon dioxide molecules and 2 ATP molecules. The electron transport chain is our last phase. It also occurs in the mitochondria. It takes the NADH and FADH2 molecules that have built up and gets energy from them in the form of hydrogen ions and electrons. It passes those electrons down electron carriers. They start out with high energy, and then by the time it's over with, they have low energy because they're releasing their energy in order to make ATP. And the electron transport chain produces the most ATP, produces 32 or 34 molecules of ATP. And this process that occurs is called chemiosmosis. So that's an overview of the 4 phases: glycolysis, which occurs outside of the mitochondria, the preparatory reaction, the citric acid cycle, and the electron transport chain and chemiosmosis all occur on or in the mitochondria. Now, when we go over these different phases, we're going to focus more on what they produce instead of getting caught up in all the many, many details of these phases. So if you look at the entire process of glycolysis, it might be overwhelming, but I will tell you what I focus on and what I want you to know. And that is, well, first of all, glycolysis means, if you remember, lysis means breakdown and glyco means glucose. So it literally means glucose breakdown. The products of glycolysis are 2 molecules of pyruvate, and they have 3 carbons each. Glucose has 6 carbons, so when it breaks down into 2 pyruvates, each pyruvate has 3 carbon atoms each. The other products are 2 NADH molecules. They will go on to the electron transport chain. And then a net gain of 2 ATP. There are 4 ATP produced, but 2 that are used. So it's a net gain of 2 ATPs. And that should be a T in that figure right there. Sorry. In fact, I'll just write over it. That should be ATP. Oh, no. Gosh, I'm so sorry. The 2 ATPs are here. So I'm an idiot. Okay, so 4 ATPs are produced, 2 are used, so it comes out. The most important thing for you to know is glycolysis produces 2 ATPs. So sorry for that mistake, but it's 2 ATPs that are produced overall during glycolysis. Now, the way the ATPs are produced in glycolysis is called substrate level ATP synthesis. And all that means is there's some kind of chemical. It's called BPG, actually. It's got 2 phosphate groups. Here's one, here's the other. And ADP has 2 phosphate groups, but it needs another one to become ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So what happens is there's an enzyme that removes a phosphate from a chemical called, this chemical here is our substrate. So it removes the phosphate from this chemical BPG and adds it to the ADP, producing ATP. So it takes a phosphate from somewhere else and gives it and uses it to make ATP. That is substrate level ATP synthesis, and that's what happens to produce the ATPs in glycolysis. Now, don't let this scare you because I really don't focus on anything except the beginning and the end. So glycolysis is a series of many steps, but I just want you to know we start with glucose, we end with 2 molecules of pyruvate. In the process, we're going to produce 2 NADHs and we're going to produce 2 overall